Hello, people. I want to discuss something. I want to discuss Whitey Bulger. Whitey Bulger, the investigation found that there were errors, incompetence that led to Whitey Bulger's death. I'm going to read a story about that, and then I'm going to explain some things along the way. But this whole thing with Whitey Bulger seems very, very suspect. You had a guy that was down at a medical unit in Florida, and he gets transferred up to West Virginia. 89 years old, has major heart issues, and they put him in. Originally put him in Florida because it's the Coleman Institute. It's the federal penitentiary, actually, is known for taking care of sick patients his age, and he was in very bad health. It made no sense why he was transferred out. But I'm going to talk about that, and we can get into that right now. This is an article that came out today. This report just came out. It's a fresh report that just came out, and it sounds like people trying to cover each other's ass. I mean, you have the Justice Department's involved in this. They're the ones that comes up with the finding. In the end, who got blamed? The Bureau of Prisons. Even though you had the Justice Department in here, the feds involved in this, and then you had the Bureau of Prisons. Those are three main people involved here. Not people, but branches that were involved here. It's obvious that something was purposely done here. And you might have innocent people that didn't even do the murder going on trial. Because, I'll explain that to you also. Investigators find errors and incompetence led to Whitey Bulger's death. A report from the Justice Department inspector found that serious failures left the Boston mobster vulnerable to a fatal prison attack. A remarkable chain of administration errors, incompetence, and health system failures inside the federal prison system led to the bludgeoning death of James Bulger. Hours after he was transferred to West Virginia in 2018, the Inspector General of the Justice Department has found. The Inspector General determined that officials in the Federal Bureau of Prisons approved the downgrade of Mr. Bulger's official medical status for the sole purpose of moving him out of a secure Florida prison to Hazelton Federal Penitentiary. And that alone sounds very suspicious. So we're supposed to believe that everything in the system broke down. And this 89-year-old man with a heart issue was being sent out of Florida to go to West Virginia because of a breakdown and because he was giving people a hard time at the hospital. But I'll explain that too. Now listen to this. This is where it gets really weird. They took no extra security precautions, even though Mr. Bulger was 89 years old. He was known for being a federal informant, which put him at heightened risk. They allowed word of his arrival to spread to more than 100 Bureau employees and eventually to the inmates, including those who beat him to death with a heavy padlock, supposedly. It's not proven yet, according to the report released on Wednesday. Mr. Bulger was preventable and resulted from staff and management performance failures, bureaucratic incompetence, and flawed, confusing, and insufficient policy procedures. The Justice Department Inspector General Michael Horowitz concluded in a 65-page report. Okay, so one of the biggest prisoners that they have at that time, there was all these errors, supposedly, that got him sent from Florida to West Virginia. A bunch of errors. And this guy was like one of the top prisoners being held, and they purposely put him in the hospital because of his health issues. While reports provide an exhausting timeline of bureaucratic failures that led to Mr. Bulger's death, it is likely to raise as many questions as it is about the underlying circumstances of the murder and the motives of the three inmates that supposedly did the murder. And once again, these guys have not been found guilty, and there's a lot of weird stuff with them too, so we'll discuss that. The report also sheds new light new light on the actions of the unit manager at Hazelton facility, who volunteered to take the notorious Boston gang leader, citing previous experience in dealing with well-known criminals. In response to Mr. Horowitz, Colette S. Peters, a new director of Prison Bureau, said that she was undertaking a series of reforms recommended in the report, including overhauls in the procedures used to share medical information and facilitate inmates' transfers. And so here, once again, they're trying to cover their ass. They're trying to figure out, why did they send a guy with a bad heart, probably not long to live, out of the hospital in Florida to a killing prison, a killing zone, basically. And we'll talk about that prison. All three men were incarcerated in Hazelton, and that's in Brewston Mills, West Virginia, where Bulger had been transferred to serve out 2 life terms for his role in 11 murders committed. So he left, just so you do know, he left this prison right here. This is the Coleman prison that is in Florida. And he was transferred to the Hazelton prison in West Virginia. And a much different look. This is a big, there's a huge hospital in this penitentiary, and this one did not. He went right into population. And the men that are accused of killing him are right here. And just so you do know, Giaz, Mr. Giaz, as we know, Freddie Giaz, I've talked about before, because he used to actually be in a crew with Anthony Aralata, who we've spoken about, Giaz. And also there was another killer named DiCologero, 48 years old now, and he was involved in it. And then there was a third killer too. Well, supposed killer. Forgive me for keep saying killer. And they're accused of beating Whitey Bulger to death with a padlock in a sock. And what makes it very strange is no one discovered the body for 2.5 hours. Inmates were all going past Whitey's cell where he was at. They seen him laying there. Nobody said nothing. And so here you got this 89-year-old man that nobody notices where he is for 2.5 hours. And he's only been at the prison for 12 hours. And so on October 30th, 2018, less than 12 hours after Bulger was transferred to Hazelton, security camera footage showed at least 2 inmates rolling Mr. Bulger, who was in the wheelchair, out of view into the corner room. So they walked up to Whitey Bulger, who's in his wheelchair, and they literally rolled him into a cell to beat him to death. And the camera picked that up, but I guess that in a maximum security prison like this, the guards don't watch what's going on on the cameras. It sounds way, way too weird. The law enforcement official said he was beaten with a padlock stuffed in a sock. When guards found him 2 hours later, according to new report, Mr. Bulger had been attacked so severely that he could not be recognized. One law official said at the time, staff members tried life-saving measures, but Mr. Bulger was pronounced dead. He was beaten to death. He was dead when they got there. The discovery of the bludgeoned body ended with a 5-year saga, in which Mr. Bulger, who had prided himself on his cold-blooded toughness, was ground down by mammoth dysfunctional federal system, known for management failures, especially with regard to treatment of older, ailing patients. Okay. After being sentenced on August 2013, Mr. Bulger underwent a health assessment. And this is where you know something was really up. And he got the second worst score you can get health-wise out of 4 scores. So he should automatically have been put into the hospital prison and stayed there the rest of his life. That's what it comes down to. He was eventually moved to Coleman, which is in Florida, which is an enhanced health facility. But as recounted in the inspector's general report, he proved to be a quarrelsome prisoner, non-compliant patient, often rejecting recommendations that he be admitted to the hospital to deal with atrial fibrillation, a serious condition linked to strokes heart attacks, and heart failures. So we're supposed to believe, being that he was such a nasty guy, 89 years old, that they couldn't control him there, and they had to send him to a supermax prison and take his health care away from him. That's what we're supposed to believe. He was then removed from general population and placed alone in a cell in the disciplinary unit. That in turn prompted administration to mount an aggressive effort to get rid of him, investigators found. First, by seeking his transfer to another level 3 prison, then by trying to upgrade his medical classification from 3 to 2 to expand the pool of potential alternate transfer sites. So basically what they wanted to do, they wanted to lower how sick he was so they can send him to a prison that has a less qualified hospital to take care of him. And this is all going on. And we're supposed to believe that this was all just a coincidence, a magical coincidence. Inspector General's office regard this decision as an especially critical moment. It found that the approval was based on a false claim made by prison officials that Mr. Bulger's atrial fibrillation, or a chronic condition that often worsens with age, had resolved itself to the point where he can be housed in a facility geared for healthier inmates. So it's nice to know that this 89-year-old man with heart trouble was getting better. The transfer was not only questionable on medical grounds, the report authors wrote it was raised additional questions because of the record of violence among inmates at Hazelton, which housed gang members, inmates with connections to organized crime. So they knew that there were guys in Boston and other organized gangs, like from Springfield, that's from where Freddie Giaz was from, that knew Bulger. They wanted to get their hands on Bulger because Bulger killed a lot of their friends, and he also ratted on a lot of people that went to prison. And he was also in bed with this agent right here, John Connolly, who wound up getting 40 years because he was the handler for Whitey Bulger, and he was giving Whitey Bulger a lot of information. Him and Whitey were basically working together, and a man got murdered because of this agent giving information to Whitey, and this guy was sentenced to 40 years, and he recently got let out on compassionate release because he's dying of cancer. Okay. No intelligent risk assessment was ever conducted to determine how Mr. Bulger should be housed. And despite his connection to past gang activity in Boston and the presence of at least one inmate with connections to organized crime in Massachusetts, Freddie Giaz, no special accommodations were made to protect him. In another email obtained by investigators on the night Mr. Bulger arrived, one inmate speculated that the officials would probably lock the facility down 30 days because Bulger was a mobster leader and a government witness. And see, that's very normal. What they should have done was, when they brought him there, lock the prison down, even if it was a couple days, because it was a high-profile guy coming into that prison. Unfortunately, every prisoner knew he was coming. And isn't it amazing that the prisoners all knew he was coming, and somehow they heard it from the administration department? Investigators discovered the Bureau of Prison has no formal policy for determining how inmates are assigned units, case managers, cells, or cellmates. In instances with no special issues are flagged, as in Bulger's case, prisoners are simply taken off buses, placed wherever the bed is available, Hazelton officials told investigators. But that's highly unlikely because the guy that ran this prison asked for him. He knew he was coming, and he knew how high profile he was. That's why it makes it very suspicious. Mr. Bulger was put in a regular cell with another inmate. So he comes into prison as a high celebrity type prisoner, and he's put in a regular area of the prison in a cell with a cellmate, and he's 89 years old and sick on top of that. 3 minutes later, on October 2018, shortly after guards unlocked doors to allow inmates to move around the common areas in the prison, according to surveillance footage reviewed by Inspector General's office, 3 minutes later, 2 men entered the cell. They left 7 minutes after that. So they went in there and beat the guy for 7 minutes. And don't get me wrong, Whitey Bulger was a piece of shit and deserved what happened to him. He destroyed a lot of lives. And but this man, we're going to talk about him being in lockup for 4 years. And this is Freddie Giaz. And we often talk about Anthony Aralata. There's Freddie Giaz at the end right there. And the Giaz brothers worked for Anthony Aralata. So that's why I always say with Anthony Aralata, we may have our differences, but I will never take away the fact that he was a very serious guy back in the day when he was a gangster before he became a rat. Let's remember, Aralata ratted on these two guys who would not rat on him. Okay. So what happened is the staff members, over the next 2 hours, guards and inmates would wander in and around the cell before a staff member noticed Mr. Bulger bloodied, unresponsive in his bunk at 8:21 a.m. He was pronounced dead at 9:04. Okay, so I wanted to read you that because it's a very strange story. And then on top of that, they took Freddie Giaz and they locked him up for 4 years, barely letting him talk to his lawyers, held him like a political prisoner. And that's unheard of in the system. And a lot of people wonder, was Whitey Bulger set up to be killed? Whitey Bulger knew a lot about the feds. You got to remember that it was not just Conley that was here. The other handlers of him that were involved in the FBI. How much did he know? Was he going to bring them down? And if you look at just look at the way everything went. 4 years, a man, Freddie Giaz, three men were accused of it, but one man, for some reason, they really picked on because he was from the Boston area, actually Springfield, and a lot of people convict him before he's even been on trial. There was a lawsuit that was dismissed. The lawsuit was by the family that had the estate of Whitey Bulger. They felt like he was set up. Many prison officials from other prisons all over the country came out and said, this is abnormal. Why did this happen? Why did they let this person go from an 89-year-old man go from the Coleman Center to Hazelton? And it made no sense. Why was everybody? Why did everybody know he was coming? Why did the administration not keep it secret that he was coming? And that's something's just wrong there, And we don't know where this is going to lead, but it sounds like to me, the Justice Department, who made sure they put him on trial and everything, and the feds and the Bureau of Prisons. They knew who this man was, being that he was so highly profiled. And now it seems like they're trying to pass the blame around. And in the end, is Freddie Giaz going to really be able to get a fair trial? I mean, they locked him up for 4 years. Imagine they put him in a hole. That means he had 23-hour lockup. He was only allowed out by himself. He wasn't around nobody. His lawyers complained that he could barely see him. His family couldn't see him. I mean, I'm not even sure how many times the family's seen Freddie Giaz, but it wasn't often. And this is what makes this so suspicious. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. And I just wanted to do this video just to give people an idea how this all works and how fishy this whole thing was. There's 3 guys that were charged with the murder. One of the guys was actually released from and he went down to Florida, and they went down and got him and brought him back. But his release was very suspicious. I mean, is he going to be coming forward and testifying against Freddie? Not sure, but it could happen. That's what usually happens in these cases. If you got 3 killers, the one that has the least record, and that was the guy that went down to Florida, and this is the guy at the end right here. And so he goes down to Florida, They go get him. Did they let him out because he agreed to testify? We'll find out when the trial comes up. Are they going to stall the trial for a long period of time? I wouldn't be surprised. Nothing the feds does surprises me. And just the whole way this whole entire thing went, nothing is surprising. I didn't know much about this until I actually started studying Anthony Aralata. I did a video on this once before and read up on the GS brothers. They were cold-blooded killers. Would a guy like GS kill him? Yes, he would kill him. He didn't like rats. You got to remember the GS brothers would not rat on Anthony Aralata, who ratted on them. That's what kind of honor they have when it came to being, rats. So can I see Freddie GS killing him? Yes, I can. But how much evidence do they have against the guy? How guilty is the guy? We don't know. I guess we'll find out soon. People, please like this video. I'd appreciate it. If you haven't subbed to this channel, please sub. And I hope this covered as much as this story as I can possibly cover. And I will put out some more reports in this story. There's going to be a lot of stuff happening, especially with the murder trials of Bulger happening. He's getting more justice now that he's dead than when he was alive, because when he was alive, he could have put a lot of other people. My belief is that he could have put a lot of other people in the FBI away. And just too much of a coincidence here, people. Welcome to America and America's justice system. Take care.